Onward to part 4. In this part, we're going to get the enemy to react to our attacks and be able to be destroyed. Additionally, we're going to make it so that the enemy can drop some treasure for us in the form of ammo or health pickups. So right now, as you can see, the enemy doesn't react at all to our attacks. I mean, it counts as a collider, but it doesn't take damage. So let's kind of take a look at what we're going to need to do to make all of this work. So the first thing is these enemies actually have a built-in hit point bar above their heads, and we could utilize that to kind of get some very quick feedback about the state of the enemy. So I've actually by default disabled it inside of here, but if we re-enable it, we can actually see that we'll get a bar above the enemy's head. Now, the big downside to this is that when the enemy rotates or when we rotate, it may not be always facing us and it will look kind of weird. So we don't really want that behavior. So we're going to need to make a quick script to make it so that that bar is always facing the player in the correct orientation. So no matter where we go to look at the enemy, the bar is always facing us. So let's create a script to do that. So in our scripts folder, I feel like this is going to probably fall under manager, maybe enemies. That's hard to say. Probably enemies. So we're going to create a script, and I'm just going to call this something very simple: always face player. And that's a script to make whatever object we attach this to always face the player. All right, so this, we don't need a whole lot. So we definitely don't need the start method. We'll just need a instance variable for player. So we only have to find the player once because searching for an object is costly. So let's, if player is null, let's find the player. So player equals capital G game object dot find game object with tag player. So that should find our player. That's plural. We don't want plural. Find game object with tag player. So we find our player. And then if the player is found, so if player is not equal to null, then we can do our rotation of this thing. So we need to get the direction to the player. And so that would be a vector 3, direction to player. So player.transform.position minus this thing's transform.position. Then if we want, we could zero out the component. So I'll call this like optional. And this basically keeps it so that like the bar doesn't rotate up and down. We'll put it in and I'll take it out and I'll show you what it looks like with both ways. So then we create a rotation to look at the player. So quaternion look rotation. Oh yeah, equals quaternion look rotation direction to player. And then we want to apply this. So transform dot rotation equals quaternion Euler angles 0 look rotation dot Euler angle dot y and 0. So let's try this and let's take a look at what this looks like. I will tweak it to provide another option, but let's see what this looks like. So where that's going to end up going, if we pull up the enemy prefab, we want to put that either on the canvas or the hit bar pivot. I think the hit bar pivot makes more sense to put it on. So we're going to put that on the hit bar pivot. And so this script is going to make it so that that bar is always rotating to the player. So we can hit play, and we can go and see that no matter which direction I go, the bar is always facing me. Now, this is the only thing that I'm not sure that I like. That when I'm on top of the enemy, it doesn't rotate up to look at us. So it kind of is only like, you know, rotating along that y-axis. Let's throw another enemy in there for good measure too. So what we can do to the script, if we don't really like that, is take this out and take that line out, and instead just make the transform directly that look rotation. And so that will make the entire bar rotate up and down if we're above or below the enemy. So we can hit save on that, and we can take a look at what that would look like inside of the game. And so as we jump or go above the enemy, the bar will rotate as well. So you can see that even though I'm above the enemy, the bar is rotating to face me. Now, if we wanted to really get fancier about this, it might be worth trying to like merge cameras and have this viewed from like an orthographic camera so that there's no perspective bending on it, as you can see. But that's a little bit beyond the scope of this tutorial. But that would be kind of the seeds that you would look up to get it to work. Alright, so, well, we've got a hit point bar, but we only want that hit point bar to show up if we've damaged the enemy, because it does kind of give the enemy away if you're looking at them from super far away and you can see that hit point bar. So we want them to only have that if we've damaged them. So let's begin setting up the enemy to use this hit point bar. So this is going to be going to the enemy script. And we need to add in some things to attach. So I don't know if I have a whole lot of things that needed to be attached here, but we could probably put it above AI settings. We'll just go on health. So we'll initialize it with, we need to pull in the UI library. So we'll put a health or an image thing here. So health bar front. Now I'm making this public, and I'm just going to directly bind it. I'm not going to search for it because there could be multiple enemies. So searching for it really isn't a good idea. So we're going to rig this up in the prefab. And then I guess while we're here, we can always start thinking about the death effect prefab. We won't need that right away. So when this thing wakes up, we want to turn off the health bar. So we'd say health bar back dot enabled equals false, health bar front dot enabled equals false. So that way those disappear whenever the game loads. Now we don't have, so we're going to set up the same infrastructure as we did on the player. We're going to use that apply damage method. So let's create that. Protected void apply damage, and this will trigger our health bar to pop up. But we might as well at least set up some health here real quick. So under health, let's give it a public int health max. Set it to 50, and a public int health of 50, so that it has some health to work with. Now inside of apply damage, we want to actually kind of deal with this stuff. So we'll say health minus equals damage. And then if health bar back is not equal to null and health bar front is not equal to null, so if both of these things exist, we will turn them on. So health bar back enabled equals true, and health bar front enabled equals true. And then health bar front fill amount will equal float cast health divided by health max. So whenever we trigger this apply damage method, it will update the health as well as updating the bars that are being displayed for the enemy. All right, so we hit save. Now this is actually going to be kind of one of the longer fixes, I guess. We have to go back through all of our old weapons and set those weapons up to send the message to the enemy script to use this apply damage method. So we're going to start with the player blaster. This is our first weapon, so we'll start there. And all we really need to do here is a very simple tweak inside of onTriggerEnter. If other.gameObject.tag equals enemy. So we might need to make sure that we have a tag for the enemy. Then other.gameObject, send message upwards, apply damage, math, and I think our damage was an integer or was a float, so we do need to turn it to an int. So we'll use math f round to int damage, because for whatever reason I decided to make damage a float here, but we want it as an integer for actually, putting into health bars and such. So we'll round it to an int here. And that's all we really need to do. So we're gonna have to go through all of our weapons and set up some kind of messaging to the enemy to take damage. But we need to make sure the enemy's tagged as enemy first. So we're gonna hit save on this. We're gonna put the tag on those HoverBots and verify that this is working. So let's pull up our HoverBot. So they're currently not tagged. So we need to add a new tag. And we're going to want a tag for enemy. Going back to the HoverBot now. So we'll tag this as enemy, although that's not actually going to make the entire structure tagged as enemy. So these are still untagged. And it's checking the tag on the thing with the collider. So that means we really just need to pay attention to the tag on the things that have the hitboxes. So this hitbox needs to be tagged as enemy. And then it will send the message to this thing, and that message will propagate up and will eventually get served by this script here. So just make sure that the section that has the collider is tagged as an enemy. Technically, it doesn't matter if this is tagged as an enemy, but I might as well. Just the place where the colliders are. And so now, when the blaster hits these things, their health should go down. Unless we have a null. Oh, we didn't assign... we didn't assign the health bars. So we just need to take the image background and put it into health bar back, and the image fill into health bar front. And then now we should get rid of that null reference exception. And so now those bars are hidden. When we actually attack the enemy, wow, I think, hey, that's interesting. the blasters can impact on each other. So it's actually receiving damage, and we haven't coded what happens when it runs out of health, but it's working. So that means we just need to go through and configure all of our other weapons to do something similar. So we'll do all the projectile weapons first. So we just did the blaster. Now let's do the rocket. Now the rocket will be kind of tricky because instead of just directly hitting something, the rocket causes an area of effect damage. And so what we need to do is, when we're going through during this impact method, right after we check to see if we want to apply a force to things, we'll want to check to see if we want to apply damage to things. So to make this easier, I'm going to make a method here called calculate damage. And this method is going to assist in figuring out how much damage to deal. So let's get the distance to the player. So we'll call this distance ratio, and that is the distance divided by the area effect. So we get an idea of how far away, on a scale of 0 to 1. Then we want to apply the damage. So probably the easiest way to do this would be float actual damage equals damage times 1.0 minus 0.5 times this distance. And this will actually create a proportional damage where if you're towards the center, you deal 100% damage, and if you're on the very edge, you do 50% damage. And then we'll return actual damage. But to facilitate dealing the maximum amount of damage, I do want to create a if within. We want to deal the full damage. So we'll say if distance ratio is less than or equal to 0.25, then we will just return damage. So you get the full damage, because it's not going to ever be 0, this distance ratio, because we're measuring it from the center of the robot to the center of where the rocket exploded. And so no matter how close it explodes to the center, there's still some distance involved in that. So this way, if you're within 25% of the AoE, you still get hit for full damage. And if that's not the case, then the fall off applies. So let's actually apply the damage. So we'll, right after this, oops. So we want to get the distance. So we'll do float distance. Oh, we want to probably if statement this. So if hit dot game object dot tag equals enemy, or hit dot game object dot tag equals player. So if we hit ourselves with the rocket, then we'll get the distance. So the explosion position, and then the location of the thing that we just hit. then we want to use that method, calculate the damage. So, and let's turn this into an int. So we'll run calculate damage and we'll round it to an int and store it to this. And then we will send the hit message. So hit.gameObject dot send message upwards. We want to trigger apply damage, sending it the actual calced damage. Now, we could put a debug log if we wanted to see this, if we wanted to verify what we had hit, if we really want to. So we want this also for the grenade launcher. So we'll want to take the calculate damage method, copy that, and then pull up the projectile grenade. Put that in after wherever my impact is. So right here's impact. Put this in here, and then let's go and grab the damage part right here and put that into the grenade in the correct spot. Now, the grenade, because of the nature of it being a grenade, we can be a little bit more generous about this, and we can make it deal full damage from up to like 50% away. So even if you're further away from the grenade, you still take that full damage as kind of a reward for using it, that the AoE on it is a little bit more generous. All right. So we can hit save on this. And now the rocket should deal damage to these things. So if we want to go test that, so we pull up the rocket launcher, and then well, something went astray. Game object is tagged, okay. So if hit body is not equal to null. Oh, that's because these don't have rigid body. I got the if statement in the wrong place. So don't put it inside of the hit body. We want it underneath the hit body. So we're going to make that change over here for the grenade as well, which we got it correct on the grenade. We just didn't do it right for the rocket. And so that could be what influences that. All right, so this should one-shot these things. Yeah, so you see its health bar immediately went to empty. And if I manage to hit close to it, it deals partial damage, and it dealt some damage to me too. So that looks pretty good. Now for the other thing, the shotgun. The shotgun actually doesn't use a projectile. Instead, we're using that hit scan to deal the damage. So when we open up the shotgun, we've got the variable here, damage per pellet. So that's going to be what we use to apply the damage. And so inside of the script, if we head towards fire 1, we can see the part where we spawned all of the pellets. So this is for each raycast, and then this is if the raycast hits. So the top part here is if it hits something. So let's apply the damage if it's an enemy. So if hit.collider.gameObject.tag is equal to enemy, then we'll do the same thing, hit.collider.gameObject, send message upwards, apply damage, damage per pellet. And so it'll apply, each pellet will individually apply its own damage. It doesn't total it up, it just, each of them sends a damage message, which is fine. And so that should work. So go back to our thing, verify that it does. And now you can see that it deals damage. If I get up super close and all of them hit, it should be enough to deplete the health bar in one shot. But if I shoot from really far away, it's might not do all of it. And so now that works. So we're so far in good shape. What we want to do now is actually get the enemy to recognize when its health has reached 0. So we're going to need to go back to the enemy script and add one more thing for it to do during its update. So what we need now is a check health method. Typically, this should be the last thing after cooldowns because it's going to involve deleting the object, and you want to delete the object as close to the end of its update step as possible so it doesn't try to like reference its position for anything. So if health is less than or equal to 0, then we want to destroy it. Now, I don't know why it wants to put a return there. If we have an explosion effect, we could say if death effect prefab is not equal to null, instantiate death effect prefab at this thing's transform dot position with an identity quaternion. So it can have an explosion. Now, for some enemies, we may want to override this. So we will actually make this virtual. Because what if we want it to just fall over and leave like some rubble or a corpse? Well, then we don't want to delete it. We would want to just trigger a different, like an animation. And we might run into that with some of our other enemies. So I'm going to make this virtual with the thought that it may get overridden in the child. We may replace this with a different behavior if we want a different behavior. So that looks good. Now let's go make the explosion. So we did import that Unity particle pack that had a bunch of pre-made explosions in it. So I think that could be a good source for this. The explosion I'm thinking of inside of the particle pack is the big explosion. However, there's a few problems with it. The debris actually kind of aren't adapted for the universal render pipeline. So that's kind of an easy fix. So if we pull this up and go to the debris, that's actually what's purple. And you can see here that it's purple. The easiest fix, and this may not be the best fix, but the easiest fix is to switch it over to an unlit transparent shader. And then that actually, you can see the little chunks if you manage to get close enough to one of those little chunks. You'll be able to see like little wreckage pieces in it. So let's go and take that and assign that into the robots prefab. So in the HoverBot, we had the slot here for the death effect prefab. And so we'll want to assign the big explosion here. So it can do that. And I think we have audio for it as well. So we have an audio here. So we can go and modify the script to include that. So we can throw on now we will need a different audio player to do this. So I'm going to also make a new audio source for hit effects and such, because there is already an audio source that's looping something. So I don't want to use that audio source. And I may be wrong on this, but there is a little like HoverBot sounding audio source. So I don't want to reuse that. So I think the easiest thing to do, I could potentially use the audio source that we used for the weapon, but I could just throw one on the hitbox here. Give it the enemy death mixer. Maybe drop the volume a tiny bit. What's volume? It's a real question here. That's loop. No, that's priority. So that's volume. All right. We'll bring it down to 6. So 60%. And then no play on awake. So then we can attach that as my audio source. I mean, technically, I guess it would stop playing the movement noise when it blows up, but we'll leave that for other purposes. And so the sound effect we want to link is the death effect. And so we should get a explosion or whatever this sound effect is when it gets killed. But there will be one glitch that we'll have to fix. All right, well, let's see. Sorry about that, Alt-tabbed. So it shoots at us, we shoot back, and it explodes. But notice that the explosion keeps on going. And so we need some way to either delete that or clean that up. What didn't he? Oh, so the problem is when we did that, the thing playing the sound is gone. So what we could do is put this on the explosion rather than trying to play it through the enemy. So let's take the prefab for the big explosion, bring it out here, and I'm going to make a new prefab for this. So I'm just going to take big explosion, bring it down into my prefabs folder, create a new original prefab with it, so that if I can make this unique to that specific enemy. So on it, I could put a audio source and then attach that sound effect. So we can have this. So we just drag and drop, make sure that, I think this is it, yeah. Audio clip here. We can use the enemy death mixer. Lower to maybe 0.8. And then in this case, we do want play on awake because when this explosion spawns, we want to hear this effect. So that's reasonable. So we've got that effect there. Now we want this to get deleted after a little while, and I could use the delete command, but I actually was having some issues getting that to work properly. Well, we could try it, see if it works. So let's go edit the enemy script. So we are going to take this out because we're not going to play the sound effect. Or maybe because I forgot to even tell it to play the sound effect. That could possibly be why. All right, let's see if it cuts this off. I think it probably will because it's deleting the audio source, but I'm curious to see if that's the case. And then the prefab is still the old prefab. And we'll see if that works. This would be ideal if we can just do it this way. No, because when the enemy got destroyed, the audio listener went with it too, and it's not picking up this destroying assets is not. Oh, that's why it didn't work. So that's definitely a conundrum. We should probably just leave the audio source on the explosion. And then we just need to give this a name. And then we want to switch the explosion that's on the HoverBot, and we can take this audio source off. So we want to change this explosion to the prefab version that I have here that has that sound effect on it. So this is the one that has that sound effect, so then I can hear it as it gets destroyed. And then it should delete it so it doesn't loop there infinitely. And now we've got some kind of cool enemy gets destroyed effects going on here. And overall, I'm pretty satisfied with how that works. All of our weapons are able to damage it. And it works. So what I'm going to take a look at in the next video, should be a really short one. I want to give these things power-ups that they can drop, some ammo or some health, and then set up just a really simple drop table with weights so that it has a, like, you could customize the percentage chance for anything to drop. So we'll do that in the next video. And then after that, we'll take a look at refining the animations and the rotation on the enemy, as well as giving the player the option to respawn. And we'll do that before we add a second enemy so that we kind of tidy up and wrap up this first enemy nice and neatly. So in case you don't get to the second enemy, you still have a pretty functional respawn system and all that. So thanks for watching, and we'll do the drop table in the next video.